July 2nd, 1944. The underground hospital cave near Cherbourg was heavy with the smell of blood, smoke, and boiled bandages. Dr. Schwester stepped slowly out of the subterranean darkness, her white coat hanging loosely on her thin shoulders. Her hands were raised in surrender, and her eyes squinted against the blinding daylight she hadn't seen in days. Only hours earlier, in the candle-lit corridors of the bunker hospital, she had told her fellow nurses, "The Americans cannot possibly have the medical supplies they claim. This must be propaganda to break our morale." Those words were about to become the first of many shattered illusions. Behind her, 8 German army nurses followed, emerging into the sunlight. They were among the first German nurses, captured by American forces in France. In the final desperate days of the siege, they had treated endless waves of wounded Wehrmacht soldiers by candlelight, rationing their last vials of morphine and boiling and reusing bandages until they fell apart. None of them could imagine that within hours they would witness medical capabilities so advanced, so abundantly supplied, that it would undermine not just their understanding of medicine, but the very ideology they had been taught to believe in. Colonel Richard P. Johnson of the U.S. 45th Evacuation Hospital looked at the captured nurses not with hatred, but with professional curiosity. These were enemy personnel, yes, but also fellow healers. Under the Geneva Convention, they would soon be returned to German lines. But first they would witness American medicine in 1944, and experience that would leave a mark, far deeper then. Their brief captivity, the unraveling of German assumptions about American medicine, had actually begun a year earlier, in May 1943, when General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim surrendered in Tunisia. Among the 250,000 Axis troops who laid down their arms were thousands of German doctors, orderlies, and nurses. Among them were women of the German Red Cross who had served with Rammel's Afrika Korps through 2 brutal years of desert warfare. Nurses like Ilse Schultz and Greta Falk, both decorated with the Iron Cross for bravery, had dedicated their lives to the Reich. But captivity revealed something none of them had been prepared for. The Americans throw away more medical supplies in a day than we receive in a month. One of them wrote, "They have medicines we have only heard about." The shock began with the journey itself. Captured German nurses boarded Liberty ships bound for the United States. Mass-reduced vessels built in numbers the Nazis had said were impossible. Their medical bays were lit by steady electric lights equipped with X-ray machines, stocked with sterile supplies and refrigeration for medicines. Blood plasma was stored safely in labeled units, eliminating the dangerous direct transfusions German doctors still relied on. For women who had worked by candlelight and rationed sulfur powder by the grain, this abundance was incomprehensible. Once in America, the revelations multiplied. German nurses arriving at P camps were given thorough medical exams. They received dental care, eyeglasses if needed, even treatment for chronic illnesses. They were fed generously, and at Christmas they were given gifts of chocolate, cigarettes, and soap, luxuries their own families in Germany had not seen for years. For women raised on propaganda that painted Americans as decadent, weak, and selfish, this kindness toward enemies was more shocking than the medicine itself. In camps like Opelika in Alabama, German nurses found themselves working in fully equipped hospitals, sometimes alongside American doctors and nurses. The technology was decades ahead of what they had known. Adjustable surgical lamps, electric cauterization, fast sterilization, autoclaves, and pharmacies stocked with hundreds of medicines. Most transformative was penicillin, the miracle drug America was producing in billions of units. For German nurses used to watching soldiers die of infected wounds, it was like witnessing magic. Where they would have amputated, the Americans saved limbs. Where Germans had watched young men wither from sepsis, Americans restored them to health within days. Even more shattering was the racial reality. Many of the American nurses they met were black women, educated, competent, and professional. These women gave orders, corrected German techniques, and demonstrated superior medical skill. Everything Nazi ideology had taught about race crumbled in the face of this undeniable reality. German nurses were forced to confront that their world had been built on lies. By 1944 and 1945, German medical personnel in captivity were being trained in American methods. They learned about public health, sanitation, vaccination campaigns, epidemic control, knowledge they would later use to rebuild a devastated Germany. They studied from American medical literature, only to discover that many breakthroughs they admired had been made by Jewish scientists the Nazis had expelled or murdered. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming for German nurses who had once been taught that medicine was a tool of ideology. Captivity taught a very different lesson. Medicine existed to heal, no matter the nationality, race, or status of the patient. They saw American doctors treat German PS with the same care as Allied soldiers. They saw prisoners receive better treatment than civilians back home in Germany. And they saw that medicine, when freed from ideology, could save lives on a scale unimaginable under the Reich. The war ended, but the lessons endured. Many of these nurses returned to a Germany where hospitals lay in ruins. Supplies were scarce, and millions needed care. They brought back not only American techniques but also a new philosophy of medicine. They founded nursing schools, rebuilt hospitals, and introduced practices like blood banking, antibiotic treatment, and professional nursing autonomy. Years later, some of them would look back on their time in captivity not as humiliation, but as transformation. They had entered American custody believing in German superiority. They left convinced that medicine must serve humanity, not ideology. One nurse would later write, "We arrived as prisoners. We left as witnesses to medicine's true purpose." The story of these women reveals one of World War II, quietest but most profound victories. Through compassion, science, and overwhelming medical superiority, America achieved something propaganda and ideology could not withstand. The transformation of belief. The captured nurses became witnesses, their worldview remade not by force of arms, but by force of evidence, by the undeniable truth that healing, guided by science and compassion, is stronger than hatred. This was America's greatest medical victory of the war, not just defeating the Axis in battle, but showing their own healers a better way to practice medicine, and through them reshaping the very future of German medicine for generations to come.